should there be any special precautions taken when field dressing an animal that they harvest?
This week on Kentucky Afield, we went live on Facebook to answer all of your chronic wasting disease and deer hunting questions. And we're bringing you those answers right now. It's all next on Kentucky Afield.
Such a pretty fish.
Beautiful.
This pond is plumb loaded with frogs.
They're everywhere in here. Yeah, this is a good fish right here. Really good fish.
Come here, girl.
Yeah, boy. That's a big rabbit.
Nice job. Yes! Yes! My first muskie. Mercy Leo!
Yeah, look at it, it's a keeper.
Here it goes! Boom!
Wow, that happened fast.
Hello and welcome to Kentucky Afield. I'm your host, Chad Miles. Tonight we're coming to you live via Facebook from the Salado Wildlife Education Center to talk about a topic that we really hope we never have to be here to discuss, and that's chronic wasting disease. Tonight is an emergency show that we're putting together to spread the CWD plan that has been put together by the Department of Fish and Wildlife. We're here to answer questions, so please submit your questions via Facebook. Chronic wasting disease. Chronic wasting disease is something that's been around for a long time, but it's never, still even tonight, been detected in the state of Kentucky. But unfortunately, due to a recent discovery not far from our border in Tennessee, it's close. So here to discuss the action plan in place, also talk about how it's going to affect our deer season and our hunters, we have our panel of guests tonight. First up, we have Gabe Jenkins, I&E Director and CWD Response Lead. How you doing?
Good, Chad. Thank you.
Next up, we have Dr. Christine Casey, who is our state veterinarian. How you doing?
Good.
And then answering our law enforcement issues, we have Sergeant Daniel Richardson, who is in the 1st District, which is the county that we're going to be talking, the counties we're going to be talking a lot about tonight.
Yep.
All right, CWD. CWD, we have a response plan with CWD, which is chronic wasting disease, and it's been in place for how long now?
So we've been thinking about CWD for the department since probably 2002. We wrote the first draft of our chronic wasting disease plan in 2003, and that plan has been an adaptive plan where we have changed and modified through time based upon new science, new research, lessons learned from other states, and our capacity as an agency as we've ebbed and flowed in divisions and staffing and expertise.
So CWD is something that we've been testing for how many years now? We've been testing a large sample of animals throughout all the counties in the state of Kentucky for chronic wasting disease for some time, right?
Right, so when we started our CWD response plan, we also enacted a surveillance program within the state. And to date, we're a little over 32,000 deer, and deer and elk for the most, but mostly those are all deer. And we've sampled multiple, hundreds of deer from every county in the state. We get samples from every county in the state every year. It's a statistically valid, scientific method that we use to collect samples to try to do the very best we can to look for the disease.
Someone may ask, as a hunter out there, well, why have we been doing this for 20-something years? But the reason is, almost all the states surrounding us have had a case of CWD. So it was a situation where we felt like, you know what, it's most likely going to happen one of these days. And we've tried to get ahead of that and watch what other states have done to see what's been successful. But this most recent discovery was where?
All right, so it was a little less than 8 miles in Henry County, Tennessee, close to the Callaway County border there in southwest Kentucky. So it's really right on our doorstep. And like you said before, Chad, that we have 7 bordering states. 6 of the 7 have detected the disease already. It's been getting closer and closer to us through time. When we wrote this plan in 02 and 03, Wisconsin was the only state east of the Mississippi that had it. You fast forward 20 years and it's surrounded, and it's really moved a lot through time. So as it's gotten closer, we've come to realize it's going to get close. We need to be prepared, and we are as an agency.
I talked to a lot of hunters out there, and they say, well, we have deer that look like they're wasting away and dying every single year here in the state of Kentucky, but there's a little bit of confusion with CWD, which we've never had, and HD, hemorrhagic disease, which is also known as blue tongue. Dr. Casey, tell me the difference between hemorrhagic disease and CWD.
Yeah, certainly. So hemorrhagic disease, the first thing you need to understand about it, it's caused by a virus. Chronic wasting disease, referred to as CWD, is not caused by a virus. It's caused by a protein, which is not a living organism at all. It's not your normal type of germ, which is either like a bacteria or virus or parasite. This is just a protein. All animals have them. And then unfortunately, in the case of a prion, it folds abnormally, and then it's transmissible, and it causes holes in the brain, essentially, which is what makes it a neurologic disease. Versus hemorrhagic disease is really a disease of the blood vessels. It's in the name hemorrhagic bleeding. And so there, what happens is, it's not always fatal. There are animals that do survive it and make antibodies, and that's the difference that we see. I mean, the East Coast has outbreaks of hemorrhagic disease. Actually, most of the United States has outbreaks commonly. And the other difference is hemorrhagic disease is spread by something called a vector, which is like a biting insect that transmits the virus, versus chronic wasting disease is transmitted through either direct contact or through the environment. And then the other big difference is that a virus can be destroyed relatively easily, and for captive cervids, there's actually vaccines that the USDA is working on for a virus. Chronic wasting disease is a protein. You can't make a vaccine for a protein that's normally in your body. So there's no vaccine available, so there's no way to prevent it with a vaccine like there is potentially for EHD or hemorrhagic disease. And the issue there as well, I think what's important to know is that HD, there's antibodies and some animals survive. Chronic wasting disease is always fatal. No matter what, there's been no animal that's been infected with a prion that's survived it. Unlike this virus, hemorrhagic disease, where animals can survive.
Yeah, so it's really a scary topic when you start thinking about, it's hard to kill.
Yeah.
What are the methods that we're taking these deer heads, and we're obviously really cracking down on transportation of any of these parts that could contain this prion. How do you get rid of it?
Well, really, there's only a handful of methods. There's some chemicals that can denature a protein, so that means degrade it, break it down, and those are very potent. So it's like a 50% bleach solution, or some other alkalizing detergent. Otherwise, you're left with incineration, and then the other method is to bury it, and bury it so that no other animals can get exposed to it. So that's the idea behind some of our disposal regs, is burying limits its surface exposure to other animals.
Because it can actually live in the soil as well.
Yeah, that's when I say when you can't destroy it in the environment, it can survive for years in the environment. So that's why these carcass restrictions for movement are so important, because we don't want the prion to get out of the zone if it's there. We want to contain it as much as possible.
So there's been some pretty hefty restrictions on moving cervids in and around throughout the state from other states or from other areas that have had CWD, right? So now it's even more important, not only outside of the state, but within the state. So some of the action plans that this new CWD response plan has in place addresses some of this, doesn't it?
Right. So, when you look at our CWD plan, it really kicks off based upon 3 different categories. One, if we detect the disease in the wild, if we detect the disease in a captive deer, and then also in if it's close to the Kentucky border. And so in this case, it's close to the Kentucky border, and then we enact certain restrictions. From where this is so close, our response is essentially the same as like we had found it in the state. So you'll see a pretty significant number of restrictions, because it is really, it's on our doorstep. And so we want to try to put as much things in place for us to be able to have an efficient sample size to sample it effectively to see if we've got the disease in Kentucky or not.
So we keep talking about this being found in Tennessee. It was actually in a county, I think it was called Henry County. Henry County in Tennessee. You kind of the plan had laid out a geographic range from that location site. And so really what we're talking about right now, currently, we still don't have it in Kentucky, but this is affecting 5 counties in the state of Kentucky tremendously. right? What counties are those?
So what we did is we have the location of where the positive deer was in Tennessee, and then we put a 30-mile buffer or range off of that. We use that number based upon the deer movements and natural migrations, things like that. It's a pretty standard number for us. And any county that fell within that buffer, we designated that as our CWD surveillance area. So those counties would be, for this example, Marshall, Callaway, Graves, Fulton, and Hickman counties.
Okay, so things are already different there. Rules and regulations, emergency rules and regs went into effect as soon as we found out, and when they got the positive, it immediately changed. And some of those changes are affecting how you're operating out in the woods today, which is why we've got Sergeant Richardson here. You're actually from the 1st District. These 5 counties we're talking about, they're within your district, right?
Correct.
Tell me some of those rules and regulations that have changed already that hunters need to know about.
The baiting ban is going to be one of the most significant ones, and then also the transportation. The baiting ban, you can't have any minerals, salt blocks, anything that the deer can ingest, any grains, anything like that. Now, food plots are okay. You know, if you're planting food plot, that's fine. But if you've got something like that out now, you need to go ahead and get it up off the ground.
So that needs to be removed. It's not like, well, I put it out after the ban. If you've got it out there, and some of these are like 50-gallon drum type spreaders, you need to get out there and get it out, right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
And it needs to be removed. And it's not a situation where, you know, the penalty's not, well, you can't hunt there. What's the penalties if you get caught in that type of situation?
It could be a warning, depending on the situation, all the way up to lose your hunting rights, lose your firearm, your bow, whatever you're hunting with, or, you know, go to jail. It could be that serious.
One of the other changes that's been in place, you're talking about moving deer parts or carcasses. We've always heard of this thing called a carcass tag. We've had carcass tags in the state of Kentucky forever. Carcass tags in this area are a little different. Tell me the difference between a carcass tag that you have to have throughout the state and the carcass tags that are required moving animals in these 5 counties.
The normal carcass tags, what everybody is probably familiar with, is what you'd put on your deer when you leave camp, or you leave it at a friend's house, or take it to the processor, or something like that. It's pretty much almost the same thing. It's got a little more additional information on it, what we're requiring now, but it's mandatory in that 5-county zone.
Regardless if you left it or if it's still in your possession, it still has to be on there, right?
Yeah, it has
the big
to be
difference on a carcass tag is that when you leave it, leaves your possession, it has to have that carcass tag on there throughout the rest of the state. This, if that deer is in your possession, you still have to have the carcass tag, right?
Yes, and it has to be visible.
Okay.
And if you bring a deer in from another part of the state, you have to have that carcass tag on there as well.
So even if it wasn't harvested, if it's in that 5 counties, it needs to have a visible carcass tag.
Right.
What information does that carcass tag need to have?
It's going to have they're downloadable on the website. They're already out there. You can go to the Fish and Wildlife website, and there's a link to download it. It'll have your name, the telecheck number, a phone number, the county it was killed, some other things. If you leave it with another person, let's say you killed a deer in Marshall County, but you got to go to work, and you take your son, and he wants to take it to the check-in station, your son can put his name on there as well.
I'd like to point out just quickly on those tags, so there is a place for telecheck number. Okay. We're not requiring you to telecheck that deer before you leave. We're not changing the telecheck requirement. You still have to telecheck that deer by midnight on the day of recovery. That's not changed. But there's a place for your telecheck number. So if you've harvested a deer and you're ready to move it, you don't have to put that telecheck number if you've not checked it. However, we're asking you to go ahead and telecheck it, get that done, and then when you bring that to the check station, that process is already completed and uploaded. So I know we've had a lot of questions on that, what that looks like. You know, might not have cell phone service or the abilities to make that call before you come. That's okay. It's there. If you've got it, please go ahead and put it down. But that rule has not changed, still midnight by the day of recovery.
I've heard several of you mention check-in stations. People are like, man, check-in stations. I haven't seen a check-in station in years. Part of the plan enacts check-in stations. Tell me a little bit about the check-in stations and what is required now, because the check-in stations are specific dates, correct?
Right. So in those 5 counties, we're going to have mandatory check stations for the early muzzleloader season, the 16-day modern gun season, and the late muzzleloader season in December. We are going to have 17 different locations. Those locations can be found on our website, fw.ky.gov/CWD. And we have the physical locations of where they all are. One thing that we strove to do was to make sure that we were as convenient as possible for everybody. We realize it's a burden. We've changed that tradition in Kentucky where we don't have check stations anymore. So everybody should have a 10-mile or less drive to get to a check station. There are 17 options. You don't have to go to the one in your county or the closest one. If there's one that makes sense to you based upon your route, make sure you have that Carcass tag and go. You just have to go to one of them. We're going to staff those from 8 to 8 every day for those seasons, and then we will also staff those the Monday following the season closure until noon as well. So if somebody harvests a deer late in the evening the last day, we'll be there as well for you to come and check that deer with us.
All right. We're also doing some additional testing, and we in the years past we've had locations where we've had freezers set up, and we would come and pull deer heads, essentially what we're talking about, right, out for sampling and testing. We're still doing that this year. Are we putting even more focus for early in the year archery hunters? Is there more focus in that area for additional testing in that method as well? Or what are we doing there?
So with the voluntary freezer drop-off program, which is what you're referring to, it's basically an option for hunters who want to get their animal tested that isn't going to be during mandatory check. And they're all across the state. But in those 5 counties, there's one in each county.
Okay.
And that's really just to make sure that everybody who wants to get their animal tested can get their tested, because that's part of what the mandatory check is about as well, is increasing our sample size. I mean, I think for me, I do the surveillance and I do the testing portion of it. And the most important thing is we haven't found it yet, but if it's here, we need to find it as early as possible. And so that means, because of the type of disease it is, it can be very clustered on the landscape, which means we need a lot of samples to find it at a very low prevalence or rate. So that means how much disease is on the landscape. And I mean, it's very concerning. I don't want to go back too far, but like to the Henry County deer in Tennessee, the issue there was it was a clinical animal, meaning it was sick. And if it was sick, that means there's such a long incubation period for the disease to develop, for them to become like visibly ill, that means that animal probably got it in that county, means it's actually probably there. It wasn't an animal that just dispersed. And so that's also why we have a 30-mile buffer, is because we know that these animals can move about naturally. And so that's why it's so important to get as many samples as we can and offer that service to our hunters so they feel safe when they eat their meat.
So you're saying there could be a deer out there for a year and a half with no signs or symptoms of any type of wasting whatsoever, but yet they're positive and they have it.
Yes.
So that becomes an issue on why someone may want to get their deer checked. So
Exactly.
if you harvest a deer and that deer is dropped off at a freezer station, or you drop it off at a mandatory check station or have it tested, and it comes back positive, which hopefully we don't get any of those. But hey, if you don't look, you don't get it.
Yeah.
We need to know, right?
We're trying to
wanna
be
know.
prepared. Yeah,
we need
exactly.
to be prepared, and we've got a plan in place. We're hoping to test thousands. We're talking thousands of deer this year are going to be checked. If it came back positive, is that deer okay to eat?
The CDC does not recommend eating a positive animal, and that's because there's other prion diseases that this disease is related to that have been able to be transmitted to humans. At this point in time, the evidence is inconclusive. There's some studies that say that primates can get it, and there's others that say they can't. And so because of the unknown risk, that's why the CDC and the World Health Organization do not recommend eating any meat that tests positive for a prion, and that's why we want to offer the testing.
Yeah.
I mean, I want hunters to feel confident that their food is safe.
Now, I'll point out too, Chad, is that when you drop off that sample, if one were to come back positive, we're going to call you immediately,
most definitely.
as soon as we find out, and let you know, hey, this deer is positive. So when you come to our mandatory check stations, or you drop a deer off at one of these collection stations, you'll get a card. It'll have a number associated with it, and it'll be on you to go online and check the result. However, if it does come back positive, we will be in touch with you as soon as possible.
What other information are we going to be providing the hunter? Is there any other incentives throughout the state to take your deer to the freezer drop-off location? Do we get any other information other than not positive or positive?
So we'll also tell you whether you come to a check station or you drop it off. We'll also tell you the age of the deer.
Okay.
So you'll be able to know, hey, was this a 2-year-old, 3-year-old, know how old it was based upon our estimation of tooth wear.
Okay. So we're also providing some additional services
Yep.
there as well.
So yeah, essentially at the check station you get a unique ID that you go online to our CWD lookup and you can look it up. It takes several weeks to get the results back, and if we do get those results and it came back positive, we will call you, like you said, immediately. If you don't get a call, you just go online and look up your result, just so that way you feel confident.
This disease, CWD, only affects what species of animals?
It's cervids.
Okay.
So here in Kentucky, the species that are at risk are white-tailed deer and elk.
Okay.
In other parts of the country, there's mule deer, black-tailed deer, moose, caribou, caribou reindeer, whatever you'd like to call them.
Okay. So all those species can be affected by this. So you need to know that, because if you're traveling out of the state and you're hunting, you got to be careful on how you bring that animal back into the state. Now that's always been the case. It's obviously extremely important that you're not going to get a lot of warnings. I doubt you're writing warnings for people bringing in animals that could be coming from positive states. Someone
Right.
goes out west in elk hunts and it's a positive state, and they bring that animal or a mule deer back.
A lot of those times, those animals get taken and incinerated,
Yeah.
and that's
So
something you don't want to. You go out west and you spend all your time, your vacation, and all your money on going out west for the big trip. You don't want to take a chance on losing that animal when you come back.
So we keep talking about if you go out west, but hey, you don't have to go all the way out west. You can actually go east. You can go to, we got CWD. What states around us has CWD right now?
So 6 of our 7 border states, every state except Indiana has detected the disease at this point.
So if you go to, if you live in the border and you hunt West Virginia, it still applies.
Yep, it applies to you. So many times people think this is an out west disease. It's not. It's all around us at this point. And it doesn't matter where it's detected in the state. If it's got CWD in the state, it's not allowed to come in as an entire carcass.
And I'll add on to that, just this past year, Ohio had their first detection in a wild deer. They'd only been positive in captive cervid facilities, and then they had a detection in wild deer. So Ohio has it in their wild deer now. And then Virginia had an outbreak in terms of like where their surveillance zone is like up by the West Virginia border, and then they had 100 miles southwest of that, they had another detection in wild animals. So like that's the issue, is that it can be everywhere in a state that's positive.
I'm assuming that what was the first year that CWD was ever detected? Anybody have an idea?
1967.
1967. So I'm assuming that some of these other states have been dealing with CWD for quite some time. Did we borrow some of the successful stories from other states that dealt with CWD and was able to contain it or slow it or whatever they did? Did we borrow some of that to help write our plan?
Oh, absolutely. We learned from their successes and failures, and initially it was a Western disease, and comparing the West to here in Kentucky, you can't really do, but some of the actions we can. And then the species are different too. There might be some lower or higher susceptibility based upon the species of deer we're talking about. The landscape looks different, the movement patterns look different. All those things are different. So we look at those states, Chrissy and I, we've interacted with our counterparts all across the country every year and talk to them, learn from their response and their efforts, and then adapt based upon what we can do here in the Commonwealth.
So the plan that we put in place, has there been a state that has enacted a very similar plan and had some success in containing it?
So I'll mention a couple. One is the state of Louisiana. They are dealing with this the exact same way we are. So they detected the disease in Mississippi, right on the Mississippi border, literally a couple miles from Louisiana, right across the river. That was a couple years ago. They've enacted their CWD response plan, gone through a very similar thing as we are, looked very hard. They've not found it yet.
Oh, wow.
So that's good. There are other states where, like New York in the early 2000s, they had it in the wild and in the captive. They did a lot of these things and have not found it since. New York does a fantastic job at surveillance, and we're confident that that something like that would work. Also, I'll use the example of the state of Illinois. We all know that it's positive, but it's come in from Wisconsin. And so they saw it coming, and they were very proactive in putting forth restrictions to try to slow its spread. And it looks like it's working there. So those are some states. I don't know if there's anything else that you kind of want to pitch in on, but I mean, those are the successes.
You made all great points. I mean, with New York, they likely caught it extremely early and at a low prevalence through their sampling effort, and that's really the ideal situation. In Louisiana, they're doing well probably because what happened in Mississippi, the Mississippi detection next to Louisiana was likely one of those outliers, a deer that dispersed really far. It was an older buck, so it wasn't, I'm going to use the word nidus. It really means like the source of the infection, because the following year, Mississippi found it up by the Tennessee border, and that's where it seems to be very prevalent in Mississippi. So it really depends where it is on the landscape, and that's why I keep harping back on it. I'm sorry, but it really is about finding it as soon as possible, because you can't make any management actions until you know where it is. Like, we have to know the distribution, where it is on the landscape, and how much of it is there before we can really make any like structured decision about how to respond to it. So what our point is like with these carcass restrictions and the baiting ban, that's about minimizing any kind of spread on the landscape. If it's here, we do not want it to spread any further. We want to stop it in its tracks now.
So, and I'll point out too, and then we can move on, Chad, is that Tennessee's doing the exact same thing right across the border. So they found it was not where they expected to find it. So they're going through a similar set of restrictions and increase in testing to see how prevalent it is over there. Is it fully ingrained in the landscape, or is this just an outlier? And between, in a couple months, between the two states, we'll have a good feel for what it looks like. And hopefully we're the Mississippi, South Mississippi, Louisiana example, and time will tell.
I'll tell you, if you haven't been to the department's website to check out the CWD response plan, I'm not going to say it's the most fascinating read, but it is interesting to see how we went through step by step in different situations, how we were going to respond. And some of it seems pretty aggressive, which is, what you want to see. And so I hope that we're one of these success stories that 20 years down the road, they're saying, here's what Kentucky did.
Yes.
And here's how aggressive they were with their response plan, and they were able to slow or eliminate the spread of CWD throughout the state of Kentucky. For the deer that get it, it's a death sentence, unfortunately. But it doesn't have to affect our deer hunting here in the state of Kentucky.
Exactly.
We need to go on at business as usual. Make sure that if you're traveling with a deer or you're hunting in one of these 5 counties, that you're aware of the rules and regulations, because it is a little different. And hey, baiting is something that, as controversial as it can be between deer hunters, it's something that happens a lot in the state of Kentucky. Baiting for deer is something that we see in every single county. And in these 5 counties, you don't want to be caught baiting with what's going on right now.
And to me, it's bigger than being caught or what's the violation or what happens to me if I break the law. Like, we don't want to have those conversations. We're asking you to not do these things or change your behaviors for us right now to look where the disease is. I mean, and it's all about the preservation of what we have in the deer herd here in the state. We don't want this disease. We want you to come along with us and partner with us and do what we ask you to do, because it's really the best thing for the deer herd. We all want the same thing. I've heard from guys that say, man, I've got this big buck on camera and I really want to shoot this thing and it's on my corn pile. Like, that's selfish, because you're thinking about you in the here and the now today, as opposed to generations into the future. And when I talk about CWD, more than likely, I'm not going to see the ramifications of it in my lifetime, maybe when I get later in life, but my kids, or little, or my grandkids, that whole dynamic might look very different. And so I really look at, like us, as we think about what our previous biologists and partners did in the 50s and the 60s to establish the deer herd that we have. We have that same opportunity now to set ourselves up for a half a century in the future. So come along with us, help us do these things. Yeah, it might be uncomfortable, might have to change your habits, but help us along with it.
Most of the states that detected CWD in the last 15, 20 years, are most of those states banning baiting completely?
Yep.
They are, okay.
And that's also one of the AFWA, so that's the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agency. That is one of the BMPs, the best management practices is to ban baiting and feeding. Because, I mean, anytime, from a disease point of view, anytime you congregate animals over piles of food, any reason for congregating an animal increases the likelihood of a disease spreading.
I would say we've learned more about social distancing in the last 2 years than we ever wanted to know about it, but really, it's kind of what we're talking about here, isn't it? We're talking about, you know, you put a corn pile there and you got 3 or 4, or a mineral lick, and you got 3 or 4 deer licking on the same exact material, there at the same time, defecating in the exact same locations. This becomes problematic when you're dealing with disease or a prion that may live in the soil.
They did a study in Minnesota over mineral licks, no less, and they were able to demonstrate that the prion is around the mineral lick and that it can be a source. I mean, it's present. It basically, that's what's crazy about these prions is the soil can uptake it, plants can uptake it. So like anything we do that increases the concentration of those prions on the landscape can potentially increase the spread, and that's why we're trying to limit that. Right now, get ahead of this. Like you said, being aggressive. I mean, we're trying to do more than what the other states, you know, we learn from them, we learn from their mistakes, learn from their successes, and try to do more, try to be better. Because it's all about protecting the heritage. I mean, we want to have hunting for the future generations. I mean, Gabe said it right there. I mean, it's a long-term game. I mean, this is a marathon. It's in the name, it's chronic. It takes a very long time for this disease to develop, and for it to have its impact on the population takes a long time, and we're trying to preserve and conserve our resource.
So you talked about, you know, deer, they like to, you know, congregate over food source, and we've heard, well, you know, deer are social, they lick on each other, they feed in the same areas. So for us, it's all about diluting the places where they congregate. So we can't control how much they groom each other, they spend their time with each other. I mean, that's going to happen. But we can control how much we congregate deer on the landscape in one single spot. So that's what we're going for is, you know, we can't change the biology and behavior of a deer. And so that it'll be what it'll be. But any other measure that we can restrict that is what we're going for. I mean, when you think about a corn pile, I mean, you could have hundreds of deer coming to one spot, chewing that, pieces fall out, it lays on the ground, another deer comes along, picks it up, eats it, ingests it. You don't really see that anywhere else in the natural landscape where they're, you know, putting things in their mouth, dropping it. That just, it's not as consistent, and it's never in a natural way that congregated. You know, if you have a mineral station, we want you to go pick that mineral up if it's still there. We know there's natural mineral sites, but we can't control those. So we're just trying to dilute those opportunities.
All right, well, we're going to get to some of the questions now. I want to know that a landowner, they still have to telecheck their animals. They're already at their house. Do they still need to take a deer to a check station if they're in those 5 counties?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep. And we're asking people in our area, we're telling them, you know, when you go out, before you go out, you always sight your rifle in, you always shoot your bow, and you make sure all your gear's ready. This is part of your preparation, too, is if you know you're going to hunt this weekend, and let's say you're going to take your grandfather hunting, or he's going to go hunting by himself, you may need to make preparations to help him take that deer to the check station. That's going to be part of your preseason scouting, if you call it, is to make arrangements to figure out how you're going to logistically get this done, because we need everybody's cooperation on it.
Next question. Should there be any special precautions taken when field dressing an animal that they harvest in these 5 counties?
So to me, I mean, always wear gloves. I mean, that's one thing that, you know, a lot of the hunters, they're macho, they don't need to wear a glove. Put the gloves on. Yeah. You know, it's just good practice and hygiene. I think that at this point is what we would recommend is just make sure you wear gloves and sanitize your equipment, clean your equipment. And it's just good practice. I mean, meat preparation just like you would at the kitchen table. So gloves and clean your utensils.
All right. What do I need to bring as a hunter if I take a deer to the check station? Do I need to bring the entire carcass? What if we talked about some hard to get to locations where they typically bone a deer out some, or they quarter a deer and get it out. What do you need to see at a check station?
So for us, we would love to see that entire carcass, but we realize that's not practical and possible sometimes. So entire carcass, or you can bring the head and also be able to demonstrate the proof of sex of that animal. If you do that and you bring the head, we're asking you to leave some of the neck on it. You know, we need that sample close to the head, so if you can come down a couple inches below the head into the neck area and cut it off there and bring that, that's fine. So we can handle either or.
Okay. What should you do if you're a deer hunter and you're in the stand or in a blind and you see a deer that appears to be sick? We've all seen this. It's been going on for years with HD. What do you want hunters to do this year if they see a deer that looks to be sick?
I would prefer they call us. I mean, I don't want people harvesting sick animals for starters, because there's always a potential, you know, for pathogen transmission. We don't know what they have, so you shouldn't be eating a sick animal. So just give us a call. I mean, we have numbers, we have technicians out there, we have staff.
Put the animal down and give us a call, or how do we handle that?
Just give us a call and let us know where you saw it last. Usually sick animals stick around. That's what I will say, is they're usually pretty easy to find again.
Okay.
So we also have a online reporting.
Yep.
So if you see a deer that's acting abnormally or that's dead that you don't see a cause, you can get on our website and, you know, sick deer reporting. You can put in a couple different things about where it is and with the number, and then we can get that information as well. But yeah, we prefer you don't shoot that animal. Reach out to us, reach out to enforcement.
And we get
let us have that conversation.
notifications when those sick deer reports come in. So we will be notified. It comes to an email account, and that's checked daily. So we definitely know about those sick deer reports.
Okay. If you drop a deer off and it's getting the CWD testing, how long will it take before the hunter gets the results?
It's probably going to be about several weeks. You know, early in the season, it'll probably be a little bit faster. But as we get more and more samples, I mean, we're talking 5,000 animals are harvested in those 5 counties over Modern Gun. So that may slow down the lab just in terms of their staffing. So several weeks should be about the turnaround.
I know deer that have hemorrhagic disease quite frequently can be found near a water source. I guess they run a fever and they want to be close to water.
Yep.
Any particular areas for deer to hang out that come down with CWD? I'm guessing since they may have it for a year or so before they actually start showing symptoms, do they?
Nothing particular on the landscape. They can really be anywhere.
Okay, so they're not going to hang out near water.
No, it's not. It's not like HD and that feverish by the water kind of thing.
If you take a good buck, do you need to keep the head at the check station? So when you guys go to do your testing, are they going to still be able to take that trophy to the taxidermist and get done what they want to get done?
Absolutely. So that's the good thing, and what we're able to offer is we're going to have check stations at multiple processors and taxidermists. So we're working with the folks out there that provide those services already, and we're just going to be there standing off to the side. You're going to run through us and go over to them too. So we can accommodate you no matter what your plan is for that animal after the harvest, and we want to be as flexible as we can. And so for sure, we'll definitely do that.
All right. Here's another question. If I hunt in one of those 5 counties and my taxidermist is not within those 5 counties, how do I take my deer to my taxidermist, or can I?
So you can, but you're going to have to remove that high-risk parts. So what we're talking about is, you know, deboning. You would remove the entire hide and then skull cap it. You know, you could get a local taxidermist to do that if you're not comfortable. And then I'll plug our YouTube and social media accounts. You know, you guys in Kentucky Afield did a fantastic video of how to do that and walk you through the process. So if it's something you are interested in trying, it's not hard. It can be a little intimidating at first, but you know, you walk through it, you can make it work. So reach out to somebody local or try to do it yourself. Look at all the different resources online and educate yourself.
Here's another question. There's an individual that says they're not a hunter, but they enjoy watching animals. Can they feed in their yard?
So no, they cannot. What they can do within their yard is still continue to have a bird feeder, but it needs to be, you know, a hanging bird feeder, not something you place on the ground. And it needs to be within the curtilage of your home. We use the word yard, things that you would, you know, the area you maintain.
Okay. So how do we get the word out to individuals that, you know, we always tell people, go to our website, go to our website. People who buy a hunting and fishing license, they probably know the website is fw.ky.gov. If you're an individual that is just a deer watcher. You like to watch them. How do we get the word out to those people? Do we need hunters to let people know if your neighbor is feeding a deer, or do we asking people? We're not talking about ratting your neighbor out. Just be courteous and let them know that this disease is on the landscape, because chances are they don't know. I mean, if they're not subscribing to a magazine that talks about CWD, or they're not Facebook fans of the department or Kentucky Afield, they may not have any idea that all this is going on right now.
Right. I mean, it's a multifaceted approach for us in all different aspects. Why we're doing the show. I mean, what we put out on social media and YouTube and print and graphics. Working with our local staff and putting flyers in community areas people frequent. So we're asking you to help us. Help get the word out, to be informed, to let everybody know. Like you said, we don't want to rat anybody out. We're just trying to educate, and so you're informed on what's going on. And
kind of the way I look at it is an individual that a neighbor that may not be a hunter that may be feeding wildlife because they want to see them and take a picture of them. They enjoy that wildlife. Yeah. They want to continue seeing that wildlife. So if you're nice about it and you let them know what's going on, maybe do we have something they can go to the website and print it out and you can hand someone and say, hey, you might want to be careful. This is something that's new. It's going on. Do we have something that we can provide to non-sportsmen and women, non-hunters or non-hunters out there that, hey, this is something you might want to be aware of. We know you love wildlife. This is something you need to be cautious with.
So we have a variety of resources on our webpage, on specifically the CWD page, that kind of targets all the different walks of life. Whether you're a hunter, you're a wildlife enthusiast, you're a bird feeder, we talk about the disease, try to break it down in very simple terms. We have frequently asked questions where we'll ask the question and give the answer to try to give you those answers to be informed on your decision making. So a variety of stuff to try to inform everybody.
I know that our next firearm season is the youth season. It's actually the week before muzzleloader season, right? I noticed that we are not putting check stations in at that point in time. Any reasons for that?
So for us, it's a couple things. One, we looked at the harvest, the traditional harvest in those counties, and it's extremely low. So we'd love to see some more people take those kids out and harvest some deer, but looking at it historically, it's low. We need a little more time to build the capacity, but also for us, on average, we harvest about 7,000 deer in those 5 counties. The majority of that comes during that modern gun season. So we didn't want to put on additional burdens that we didn't feel were necessary, and it wasn't necessary because of the low volume of harvest. And so we tried to pick those where we're going to get the best effort, the best number of samples.
Yeah, you said 7,000 in those 5 counties. I heard you say 5,000 for modern firearm season. So that means you're only looking at 2,000 for the youth season, 2 muzzleloader seasons, and all of archery and crossbow.
You got it.
That's not a large number.
And that's what the freezers are out there in those 5 counties for. So folks who are hunting outside of the mandatory check seasons, that they can still get their animal tested. So if they're hunting during youth season, they can certainly drop it off at the freezer.
We're still getting questions coming in, but I want to make sure that we get out there one more time for all these individuals that are hunting these counties or moving deer carcasses through those counties. What, again, are the need to knows? We're talking about the new rules and regulation changes that are in place. Start with the ones that legally that they need to know right now that they need to quit doing or stop feeding, obviously.
Stop feeding, correct. Right now, if you know somebody that lives out of state that leases a place up here, that they may have a feeder out that they came up and put up, in August, give them a call and say, hey, you want me to go take your feeder down for you?
That's a very good point, yeah.
Go help them out, go pick up their mineral block for them, something like that, and then get the word out to some of those out-of-state hunters that are coming in.
So immediately we need to stop feeding, and then when the season comes in, we're talking about muzzleloader season 2 weeks from now. What do they need to know then?
They need to know where the check stations are going to be. Go ahead and print off that carcass tag. Don't wait until you kill the deer and go, oh, I need my carcass tag. It's too late then. Go ahead and print it off when you print your license off. Print off 2 or 3. Get some Ziploc bags to put them in. Go ahead and get prepared and have some of those for your friends, some extras.
And then knowing where these stations are located, these check stations, I know there's 5 counties. It seems like there's 17 check stations, something like that. There are a lot of options. Know which one's the closest to where you're hunting, or which one's going to be the easiest for you to access. So you need to know where your check stations are at. Then outside of that, what do you need to know as far as your carcass tags?
You need to have them with you, and you need to know that before you leave that 5-county zone, first has to be deboned, all the meat, and then you can leave. And then if say if you're in my county, I live in Marshall County, but I want to go to Hopkins County and hunt deer. If I'm coming back to that county, that 5-county surveillance zone, I need to have a carcass tag on that deer from outside of it when I come in.
So
also,
even if it wasn't harvested there, didn't live there, it doesn't matter. When you're in
Right.
that 5-county zone, you need to have that on the
Yep.
animal, and it needs to be visible.
Yep.
I'd like to point out just too, we're sharing an example of what a carcass tag could look like, but it doesn't have to be that form. We're asking you specific information you have to put on it, but it can be a homemade form made out of a piece of paper, 3x5 cardstock, and it still has to be affixed so that the keys are affixed to that deer, clearly legible, and it stays. So it can't be this little crumpled up piece of paper that you hide in the ear. That's not going to suffice. It needs to be something that's big and easy, that's going to withstand some movements sliding around the back of the truck and have some dexterity for sure.
Attaching a piece of paper that on an animal that's been drug around and carried on, you need zip ties, you need some string, some twine. It's another item you need to throw in the hunting bag, because you can't tie a piece of paper to a deer. It's not really that possible. You need to make sure you got something in your bag now to attach it, a zip tie or some twine or something.
And also remember, got to have that harvest log filled out. So you already got the pen in your pack to fill out the harvest log when you harvest that deer, and then go on and fill out that carcass tag so when you're ready to move. So don't forget the harvest log as well.
Yeah, they're very important. Anything else that hunters need to know about?
Unfortunately for us, on our side, there's going to be some people that try to circumvent the system and look the other way. And if somebody does want to report that, there's several options out there for them to do that. They can call the 1-800-25-ALERT number, or on our website, there's a link to an app that you can text anonymously to, and your information will be secure, anonymous. So if they have some information that they want to report, they can do that as well.
You see a deer coming or an elk coming from out of state, and it's the entire animal. It's driving down the road. You have a way that you can go on. What's the number again?
1-800-25-ALERT. That'll go to our dispatch center, or the Kentucky Fish and Wildlife app. You can download that on, I think, Google and iTunes, and you can even send pictures as well.
Okay. All right. Yeah, everybody's got a phone in hand nowadays, so be careful. Don't be taking pictures and driving. That can be dangerous. But if you can get a picture,
have somebody else take a picture for you.
Have somebody else take a picture. All right. If you see a sick deer while hunting, should you shoot it and have it tested, or is there another way to go about it so they don't have to use their tag in order to test the deer? We talked a little bit about this, but say a person does take a deer and it comes back positive. We hope to goodness this doesn't happen. They want to know is there a way for them to not use their tag since they're not going to eat that meat?
So we'll address that if we have to with CWD.
Okay.
Right now our effort is in surveillance, and we don't expect to see the disease. If we were to detect CWD, things change again. Okay. And so the rules would have to change. We'd have to revisit all of our plans. So, I would say go back and look at our CWD response plan. We talk about some of those things and some of those measures, but we'd have to go back and revisit with our board and our staff and see what we want to do.
So this doesn't give you an additional tag. It doesn't give you another buck tag. You saw a deer out there that, hey, sometimes during the peak of the rut, I've seen bucks that look pretty worn down, beat up. You're like, man, is that something wrong with that thing? They can lose a lot of their body weight in fighting and defending their territory. What's a number for a buck that loses the percentage-wise of its body weight?
They can lose 15-20% of their body mass from September to the middle to end of November, just from running and fighting and chasing and doing all that. And then they get whipped a couple times. They're stove up pretty hard. I mean, you imagine just going and playing a football game all day without pads. It can be the same way. So that deer might look pretty rough, might look injured to you or sick, and really he's just trying to recover from the breeding season. So why we're asking you not to shoot them, because it just might be a natural thing that they're going through, and then just let us know. And like Dr. Casey said, most of the time if an animal's truly sick and you see it, when we're back there, it's still there.
Yeah.
You still have to tag that deer after you do harvest it, you know, if you do shoot it, and you know, it's happened to me before. I shot a deer with my bow and it had some ground shrinkage.
Yeah.
When I got down, I'm like, man, it's not what I thought it was. But we've had instances where hunters have called us before and they say, I shot this buck and it's got sores all over it. Now that I'm up on it, I still have to tag it and use my buck tag. And yeah, that's part of the system. That's part of the game.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, yeah.
All right, you actually addressed this. We've had a plan in place for over 20 years. It's a response plan. So what is next if, and let's hope it doesn't happen, if CWD is found? I'm sure the plans are written out on what the next step, what the next wave is. What is the next step if CWD is found in Kentucky?
So it's essentially what we're doing now as far as restrictions go, is we want to cast a broad net in surveillance and try to get a lot of samples from a very broad area close to where the positive animal was detected. And then that allows us to look at prevalence and spread of the disease. So similar restrictions that we're doing, you can see that in our response plan. I know what we want to do is work with our hunters and let the hunters be the point of the pencil and handle all the management, and we just want to be able to collect the samples from the hunters. And that's the good in this, if you want to look at it this way, is that we can put it together a few restrictions and be able to get all the samples we need to be very confident that we've sampled at a high level at the end of the season. So, you know, our plan was always written to kind of give us first steps, but we would never know the when and the where. Mm-hmm. And then once we find out the when and the where, then we can take the mold essentially that's in our plan and apply that. But it's a very high level, and you know, all the details that we've been working on literally around the clock over the last couple of weeks to try to put all these in motion and then inform all the folks about what the restrictions are and what that looks like. It's a lot of moving parts.
So I know that the way the plan was written out now, it was, okay, is it in the state or close to the state? Is it in a captive facility? Yep. Or is it in the wild?
Correct.
And once, okay, it's here below the state line, it's in Tennessee, and it's a wild animal. It's not captive. And then you get an X amount of radius around it. So
right.
If it happens to find somewhere else in the state, expect another radius, but this is the entire radius is going to be within Kentucky if it's found in the state.
Correct.
And it's going to affect more counties, and it's going to be immediate. So you need to make sure you're keeping up with social media, the department. And you know, I know this year, if that happens, it's going to affect a lot of people really fast. Mm-hmm. I know this year, our hunting and fishing, our hunting guides for the fall was already out.
Right.
So if you go to the hunting guides, which are being shipped now, or they're out there in our hunting stores that sell our license, they're out there. There is a supplement to that. It was already printed, they've been shipped when this came out. They can find that supplement and find all that information at our website. And then how are the additional 4 or 5 pages, how are we getting those out there?
So, you know, like you said, there's a 4-page supplement that will go online. We're also going to print that supplement and send it to all of our vendors, people who sell licenses in those 5 counties. We're also going to try to get them in places where we know people like to frequent, just to try to help get the word out. So, I know we'll have it up online. We've put together a handful of pieces already, communication pieces this week, and just try to get it in those hands of our hunters and our landowners in those 5 counties the best we can.
It's really wild, all the testing. You said how many, 13,000? Is that what you said? How many CWD tests have we ran?
We've 32,000.
32,000. 32,000 tests. I'm sure Tennessee's doing a bunch of those tests too. And yet this deer, did it happen through a regular hunter harvest?
No, so that was the good thing of why it kind of highlights why we're doing what we're doing. So TWRA literally got a call of this deer that was acting sick, and they went down and it was there and they collected it and got it tested. So it's a very common thing for other states to do, and we have the exact same thing in process. And why we've spent a lot of time talking about it tonight is having that ability to call us and let us know. And
all in all, the timing is really not good. I mean, it's all of our hunting guides are already out there. People are planning their hunts. They're baiting. They're taking photos of their deer, and then bam, it happens. So that's why spreading the message, not only spreading the message with us, spreading the message to those in social media, sending people to our website, but also spreading the message to other hunters. So do your part. Get out there, spread that message to other people who may be out of the state. Maybe they don't keep up with social media. Maybe they're an individual that doesn't hunt at all but is feeding deer. do your part and spread the message of exactly what's going on just south of us here in Tennessee. Still not in Kentucky. We want to continue to tell people we've still never found it in the state of Kentucky, but do your part to spread that message and familiarize yourself with the response plan and what is expected out of you, the outdoors person, be it a hunter or an outdoor enthusiast. What's expected of you to make sure that we can do our best to contain this really, really nasty disease. Thank you guys so much. Hey, the next show for Kentucky Afield will be in 2 weeks. We're actually preempted this upcoming week. Hey, don't let this dim your hunting season. Get out there. I've already been out. We got a deer show coming your way. We've already been out doing some archery hunting. I plan on getting back out there in the woods. Hopefully, this is not going to impact the counties that you live in as far as a positive test. Get out there, take that deer. If you're in that 5-county zone, make sure you get it to a check station, get it checked, and enjoy this beautiful fall that is coming our way here in the state of Kentucky.